Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, December 3rd, 2025. Republican candidate wins the Tennessee 7th Congressional District special election by a comfortable margin, but not as big as President Donald Trump's victory in the 2024 presidential election. We'll get reaction from party leaders in Congress about what this may mean for the 2026 midterm elections. President Donald Trump pardons Congressman Henry Cuellar, Democrat from Texas, and his wife, Imelda, who were facing bribery charges. The president announces a rollback of Biden-era vehicle fuel economy standards, arguing it will lower car prices. Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington State introduces a bill to cut down on ICE automatic detention of certain groups of migrants and end for-profit private immigrant detention centers. The NASA administrator nominee Jared Isaacman gets a second Senate confirmation hearing. He was nominated, then the president withdrew the nomination, and now he's been renominated. And NATO Secretary General and the British Prime Minister talk about Russian President Vladimir Putin saying that Russia is ready to go to war with NATO. The comments made while talks were ongoing trying to end Russia's war in Ukraine. Associated Press writes Republican Matt Van Epps won a nationally watched special election in Tennessee for a U.S. House seat Tuesday, maintaining his party's grip on the conservative district with help from President Donald Trump. But the comparatively slim margin of victory fueled Democratic hopes for next year's midterms as the party grasps for a path back to power in Washington. A military veteran and former state General Services Commissioner from Nashville, Van Epps defeated Democratic State Representative Afton Bain to represent the 7th Congressional District. With 99% of votes counted, Van Epps' lead was around 9 percentage points. The previous Republican who held the seat won by 21 points last year, and Trump carried the district by 22 points. That was from Associated Press. President Trump writing on Truth Social Tuesday night, congratulations to Matt Van Epps on his big congressional win in the great state of Tennessee. The radical left Democrats threw everything at him, including millions of dollars. Another great night for the Republican Party, signed President DJT. And today, U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, was asked about this race.
Can I ask about Tennessee, Mr. Speaker? Obviously, Republican victory last night, but the margin of victory was far less than the margin of victory for the incumbent in 2024 and President Trump. Are you concerned that that's maybe a bad sign for Republicans next year?
I am excited about the win last night. As you know, I spent the last day before Election Day there with Matt Van Epps. He's an extraordinary candidate. He's going to be a great member of Congress. And let me talk to you about the margin of victory. The Cook Report rates that district as an R+10. He won by 9 points in a special election. That's actually right on target and what would be expected. Special elections are odd things, as you know. I was sharing earlier an example of Ron Estes in Kansas. Almost identical situation in the first Trump administration, 2017. The president won his district by 27 points. Ron Estes was elected by 7 points in a special election like that. But then he came back the following year in the big election year, and he won it by 20 points. So there are lots of examples like that. I could name 5 members right now had similar circumstances. Most recently, Randy Fine in Florida had an anomaly down in his race. But these things sort out. What we see is all positive signs ahead. We are very bullish. Y'all have all heard me say very bullish about the midterms. We have to defy history for the president's party to pick up seats in a midterm. But we have the team in place to do that. We have an extraordinary record to run on. Everybody's going to be feeling better about the cost of living early next year, first and second quarter, because all the provisions of the Working Families Tax Code, the big beautiful bill, will become implemented. And all the things that we know and have projected will happen will. We're going to be in a very good shape going into that.
With the Van Epps win, though, do you think that this might give agency to some Republicans who have talked about maybe trying to retire early? I know Green is leaving, but they say, oh, we got another seat. We got a margin here. You don't think there's going to be any more of that going on?
Certainly hope not, Chad. I hope everybody fulfills
Well, I know what you hope, but what do you think?
I don't think it'll happen. I don't.
U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson speaking to reporters today in the U.S. Capitol building. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, spoke on the Senate floor today about the Tennessee 7th Congressional District special election and what the result might indicate for the 2026 midterm elections.
Last night, Americans once again went to the polls in an election where affordability, how much people have to pay for the things they really need, was the driving issue. A deep red Tennessee district that Trump won by 22 points swung by double digits in Democrats' direction. Mr. President, last night was the latest flashing red light indicating that Americans are fed up with Republican policies particularly how much they have to pay for the things they really need. Donald Trump doesn't get it. At yesterday's cabinet meeting, Donald Trump once again doubled down on the bizarre claim that the affordability issue is somehow a hoax. Yeah, maybe it's a hoax for a billionaire like him and all his cronies who never have to worry about how much they have to pay for the things they need. But American people have to worry, and worry about it every week when the bills come in and they say my income isn't equal to what I need to buy. And the costs are going up and up and up, in large part, in good part, because of Donald Trump and his administration's policies.
Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, the minority leader, speaking on the Senate floor. Republican Congressman-elect Matt Van Epps will serve out the remainder of the term of former Republican Congressman Mark Green, who resigned to accept a private sector job. Matt Van Epps, in his victory speech Tuesday night in Nashville, thanked President Trump.
Our victory was powered by supporters of President Trump turning out to vote. The president built the largest, most diverse coalition to ever elect a Republican, and we leaned in on that. President Trump was all in with us, and it made the difference. In Congress, I'll be all in with him. Thank you.
Matt Van Epps Tuesday night in a victory speech. He beat Democratic nominee Afton Bain, who Tuesday night, also in Nashville, thanked her supporters for making the race closer than the district demographics suggested it could have been.
And although tonight is not the final result of what we wanted, but it is the beginning of something so powerful in Tennessee and across the South. I am so proud of the race that we won. The Republicans made these districts to be uncompetitive. They wanted us to back down, and we did not back down. We showed up.
Afton Bain in her concession speech Tuesday night in Nashville, Tennessee. When the victor, Matt Van Epps, is sworn in by House Speaker Mike Johnson, expected on Thursday, Republicans will have 220 seats to the Democrats' 213 seats in the House, with 2 vacancies, one each in Texas and New Jersey. Axios writes President Trump on Wednesday announced he is granting a full and unconditional pardon to Congressman Henry Cuellar, a Democrat from Texas, who was indicted last year on conspiracy and bribery charges, which he denies. Trump has granted clemency to several former Democratic elected officials, but it is an extremely unusual move for the Republican president to pardon a sitting Democratic member of Congress. Trump, in a post on Truth Social, alleged that the Biden administration weaponized the justice system and prosecuted Cuellar because he bravely spoke out against the Biden border catastrophe. Axios article also says the president added that he will pardon Cuellar's wife, Imelda, as well. She was under indictment on the same charges as her husband. The president was asked about this in an Oval Office news conference.
Mr. President, did you speak with House Republican leadership about your decision to pardon Congressman Henry Cuellar? And are you concerned that you made a vulnerable Democrat perhaps less vulnerable with that decision?
It didn't matter. He's a respected person. He was treated very badly because he said that people should not be allowed to pour into our country. And he was right. He didn't like open borders. He was on the border. You know, he represents a very respected man. He represents the people on the border. And he saw what was happening. And as soon as he made that statement, I then said, I'll bet he gets indicted. And that's what happened. You know, I put out my truth from that. Well, I did a truth, wonderful truth. We love truth. But what happened is he got indicted for speaking the truth. And his wife got indicted, Imelda. And that's sort of a first. Usually they leave the wives alone, right? Don't they, Congressman? Typically they indict somebody, put him in jail for the rest of his life, but the wife can just sit home and cry, or she'll find a new man. You know? A lot of times they find a new man that makes them much happier. In fact, a lot of times they like that man better than the one that's in jail.
President Donald Trump taking reporters' questions in the White House Oval Office. Reporters caught up with Congressman Henry Cuellar in the hallway of a House office building.
I want to thank President Trump for this action that he took. On behalf of my wife and my family, I want to say thank you. I think the facts have been very clear about this, but I would also say I want to thank God for standing during this very difficult time with my family and I. Now we can get back to work. Nothing has changed. We will continue working hard. In fact, right now I got another congressman where we're working on some legislation, but I just want to, for now, that is my statement.
Congressman Henry Cuellar speaking to reporters. Another group of reporters also asked him about his future plans. He's running for re-election.
How do you know that this was coming?
You didn't talk to the president of the White House at all?
I'm going to go to the White House Christmas party next week, and I'm going to thank the president personally.
And to be clear, you filed for re-election as soon as you found out?
As I said, nothing has changed.
Does that mean that you're running as a Democrat? Can you just be clear? Are you running as a Democrat?
Why not?
As I said, nothing has changed. I am a conservative Democrat, and I am very bipartisan. And I work with my Republican friends when I need to work with my Republican friends.
Was there any deal cut with the White House? Was there any deal cut with the White House?
No.
There was no deal cut with the White House?
No.
Si habló con la Casa Blanca, ¿nos puede decir en español?
No, yo no hablé con la Casa Blanca.
¿Le dijo algo a sus hijas para que les mande una
No,
carta?
mira, como dije, niñas quieren a sus papás y son mujeres que pueden pensar por ellas.
Could this pardon hurt you in a primary? Are you worried about your primary politics?
Look, I'll say this before I go. The primary have spent $20 million. I'm talking the far left. They want to spend another $20 million. We'll win it. But this is a conservative district, and I'm going to win it.
Congressman Henry Cuellar, Democrat of Texas, speaking to reporters in a House office building in Washington, D.C. Those last words, or as an elevator he got on, closed. The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, welcomed the pardon in an interview on CNN.
Congressman Cuellar is a beloved member of the House of Representatives, loved in his community, particularly in Laredo. I've had the opportunity to spend time with him down in Laredo in South Texas. I look forward to that moving forward. Listen, the reality is this indictment was very thin to begin with, in my view. The charges were eventually going to be dismissed, if not at the trial court level by the Supreme Court, as they've repeatedly done in instances just like this.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader on CNN. Politico writing that Congressman Cuellar and his wife were charged in 2024 with accepting $600,000 in bribes from foreign entities. The moderate Democrat, who has long been a battleground target for Republicans, was nonetheless reelected to his South Texas seat in November. President Trump's pardon of Cuellar comes just a day after national Republicans got their top recruit to challenge him in a seat made redder thanks to Texas's mid-decade redistricting. That was from Politico. President Trump mentioned border security and immigration as the primary reason that he gave Congressman Cuellar a pardon. Reuters writing, U.S. immigration officials kicked off an operation in New Orleans to arrest immigrants in the U.S. illegally, federal officials said on Wednesday, making it the latest city to be targeted by President Donald Trump's crackdown. U.S. Department of Homeland Security said the operation would target criminal offenders who had been released from local custody due to city policies that limit cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. That reporting from Reuters, a spokesperson for the Homeland Security Department, Tricia McLaughlin, was on CNN.
So Catalina Crunch, which we are launching today down in New Orleans, we're first and foremost really focusing on those worst of the worst criminals, those criminals who have previously been locked up by local authorities. But then because New Orleans functions as a sanctuary city, those individuals were not released to ICE. They were instead released back onto New Orleans streets. So we're talking about child pedophiles who are on our list of targets, burglars, gang members, rapists. Those individuals we are highly targeting. And we will continue whether it be 5,000 arrests or beyond.
Tricia McLaughlin is the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the Department of Homeland Security today on CNN. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, Democrat from Washington State, says that she is reintroducing her bill Dignity for Detained Immigrants Act, which would stop automatic ICE detention for low-risk immigrant groups, including caregivers and those without criminal convictions, and instead have a presumption of release. The bill would also phase out private for-profit detention centers and implement protections for immigrants' civil and human rights. She spoke at a news conference outside the U.S. Capitol building in Washington.
We are here because every day we are seeing this expanding immigrant incarceration system, and we are seeing abuses of Americans and people in our country across every single state as people are kidnapped and disappeared and put into the largest for-profit incarceration system in our country, the immigrant detention industrial complex. The administration wants you to think that immigrants are all criminals, but the immigration system is a civil system, not a criminal system, and immigration is not a crime as much as Trump would have you believe differently. And that's exactly why the fact that it's a civil system is exactly why immigrants in detention are actually not provided with attorneys, as happens in the criminal justice system. Think about that. Immigration law is extremely complex, second only to tax law in this country. But we don't provide attorneys for people who are detained. They have to find pro bono attorneys, or they have to find the money to hire somebody. This is not a fair fight. And courts across the country are ruling against Donald Trump's mass detention and deportation policy. At least 225 judges across the country, including 23 appointed by President Trump himself, have ruled against Trump's mass detention policies, saying that they violate due process under the law. Today, Trump has locked up an unprecedented 66,000 people in the most dehumanized conditions in his push for mass deportations of immigrants of every status, a number that will only continue to skyrocket with an unprecedented $45 billion more for ICE that was included in the Republicans' big bad betrayal bill, even as they stole health care from 16 million Americans. ICE's own numbers show that 73% of those who have been detained have absolutely no criminal record. And the vast majority of the remaining 27% have minor convictions like traffic violations.
Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, Democrat of Washington State, at a news conference on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol building. Newsweek article about the bill she's introducing today has this: before January, ICE detention rates sat at around 47,000, already over the capacity Congress had approved and funded. Under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passed and signed into law in July, the agency's budget soared, allowing a rapid expansion of detention facilities. The current detained population is around 65,000 per ICE's latest data published on November 21st. That was from Newsweek. This is Washington Today. TechCrunch writes the Trump administration announced plans Wednesday to lower fuel economy standards for cars and light trucks sold in the United States. With CEOs from Ford and Stellantis in attendance, President Donald Trump proposed rolling back fleet-wide fuel economy to 34.5 miles per gallon for 2031 model year cars. The previous fuel economy standard was for new vehicles to have 50.4 miles per gallon by 2031. The regulation change also reclassifies crossovers as cars instead of light trucks. That was from TechCrunch. Here is President Trump in the White House Oval Office.
From day one, I've been taking action to make buying a car more affordable. I signed an executive order to end the unfair, expensive electric vehicle mandate. As you know, we had to have an electric car within a very short period of time, even though there was no way of charging them and lots of other things. It would have cost $5 trillion to build the charging plants. And as you know, in certain parts of the Midwest, they spent, to build 9 chargers, they spent $8 billion. So that wasn't working out too well. That was done before me, by the way. I wouldn't have let it go forward. We're canceling the EPA's absurd tailpipe emission standards, one of the most important things that I've never had a group of people come to me more powerfully and really just devastated that they had to do it. It was killing them, than the automobile manufacturers, the tailpipe emission standards. And I can tell you, your people at Ford were coming to me all the time, and they were saying, like, please, it doesn't do anything, and it's killing us. And it's driving the cost through the roof. And we revoked Biden's emissions waiver for California so that California communists could not regulate the automobile industry and ruin the entire nation of automobiles. And they were doing that too. But we have that now under control also with your governor who's got much more than he can control. Now, under the new rules being issued today by Secretary Duffy, the Department of Transportation will rescind the Biden fuel economy prices. And I hate to say that because they were really not economy. They were really, they were anti-economy. They were horrible what they were doing to the costs and actually making the car much worse. But these policies forced automakers to build cars using expensive technologies that drove up costs, drove up prices, and made the car much worse. The action is expected to save the typical consumer at least $1,000 off the price of a new car, and we think substantially more than that.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office. The White House also said the total savings from these changes will be $109 billion over 10 years. And the article from TechCrunch also has this. President Trump also said he would authorize the Department of Transportation to allow automakers to manufacture really small cars, like the kind found in Japan and South Korea. Wall Street today, the Dow up 408, NASDAQ up 40, S&P up 20. CBS News writing that private sector employers in the U.S. cut 32,000 jobs in November. Payroll firm ADP said Wednesday, a surprise drop that could firm up expectations of an interest rate cut next week. Forecasts had predicted a rise in employment last month, with economists polled by FactSet expecting private employers to add more than 40,000 jobs. That was from CBS News. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was interviewed on CNBC about the ADP report.
So before we get into some of these trade negotiations and deals, I do want to ask you about the recent economic data, because today we learned that the private sector is losing jobs. Small business getting hit really hard. Negative number in front of ADP, and one of the reasons that they cite is tariffs. So do you worry about some of the economic fallout here as these tariffs really take hold?
No, it's not tariffs. Remember, you had the Democratic shutdown, right? And what do you think happens to small business? The people who do business with the U.S. government, they know they're not getting paid, so they sort of slow down their projects. So you saw a little bit even of construction of small business down. So the Democratic shutdown hurt the numbers. And then remember, as you deport people, that's going to suppress private job numbers of small businesses. But they'll rebalance and they'll regrow. So I think this is just a near-term event. And you'll see as the numbers come through over the next couple of months, you'll see that all pass. And next year, the numbers are going to be fantastic. I think because the jobs of building in America, you know, as Donald Trump talks about, President Trump talks about the huge construction projects coming to America, I think you're going to see GDP next year superb, over 4%.
I mean, you can definitely point to the shutdown, but we hear all the time that businesses do struggle with tariffs and the higher costs and the uncertainty that comes around that. And even if you don't think that that's happening, I mean, factory activity shrinking in November by the most in 4 months. We got a manufacturing report this week, and in that survey, they did cite tariffs as a reason. I mean, this was a sector that was supposed to be helped the most by what you're doing on the trade front.
Look, tariffs, you know, you're overstating. The fact is, we know, because we've studied it, that prices don't move unless tariffs are above 15%. They just don't move at all, because the suppliers and the distributors eat the numbers, and that's why prices stay the same. You got inflation at the same levels, you know, cut to below 3%. I mean, these are key numbers. You heard prices coming down, energy coming down. It's not tariffs. It's simply a matter of there's idiosyncrasies in October with the shutdown. I think you'll see that pass, and things will go incredibly well next year.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick on CNBC. The November jobs report from the Labor Department was originally scheduled to be released on Friday, but due to the recent government shutdown, that's been delayed until December 16th, and that report will also have partial data from October. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Watch America's Book Club, C-SPAN's bold original series. This Sunday with our guest, best-selling author Jodi Picoult, who has written 29 books about a wide range of controversial and moral issues. Her books include The Storyteller, 19 Minutes, and her latest, By Any Other Name. She joins our host, renowned author and civic leader David Rubenstein.
People come to you and say, you've changed
their views on certain social issues because of your books?
That's why I write, you know, it's to start a discussion. And you can't always have a discussion with people. Some people just aren't ready to hear it. But there are a lot of minds that you can change one mind at a time.
Watch America's Book Club with Jody Picoult this Sunday at 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern and Pacific, only on C-SPAN.
And if you miss an episode, you can find America's Book Club as a podcast at cspan.org and wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. A few more headlines. New York Post writing, the House Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan formally summoned ex-special counsel Jack Smith to appear for a deposition and answer questions about his probe of President Trump that led to 2 separate federal prosecutions of the once and future commander-in-chief. Due to your service as special counsel, the committee believes that you possess information that is vital to its oversight of this matter, Jordan explained in a letter accompanying the Wednesday subpoena that was from the New York Post. And from the Hill, U.S. military struck an alleged drug trafficking boat in the Caribbean at the center of a controversy involving Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth 4 times during September 2nd attack, according to a U.S. official who spoke to The Hill Wednesday morning on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive operations. The full attack killed 11 people on board the ship as part of an operation by the Trump administration against what it says are narco-terrorists. U.S. Armed Forces hit the purported drug smuggling vessel 4 times on September 2nd, twice to kill the 11 people who were on board and twice more to sink the vessel, the U.S. official who spoke to The Hill said. Also, President Trump in the White House Oval Office asked whether he will release the video of the second boat strike. He responded, "Whatever they have, we'd certainly release." From Politico, a bipartisan group of senators and House members led by Josh Gottheimer, Congressman, Democrat from New Jersey, and Jen Kiggans, Republican of Virginia, will be meeting Wednesday afternoon with Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, to see if there's a path forward on bipartisan health care legislation, going to a person granted anonymity to share plans for the closed-door session. The meeting is notable because Cassidy, chair of the HELP Committee, has been working with Senate Finance Chair Mike Crapo, Republican of Idaho, on a party-line alternative to Democratic legislation that is expected to extend expiring Affordable Care Act subsidies. Gottheimer and Kiggans have been active in the House trying to forge a bipartisan compromise on the issue, particularly inside the chamber's Problem Solvers Caucus. That was from Politico. More than 20 million Americans buy health insurance through the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, and the premium subsidies put in place during the COVID-19 pandemic are set to expire at the end of this month. The Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, the HELP Committee, held a hearing today about health care reform. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican of Missouri, called for a fix to the ACA subsidy problem and proposed a reform of his own. No taxes on health care.
On the subsidies, on the premium tax subsidies, let's just be honest. If we don't do something on this issue, if Congress does not take action on this issue in the next few weeks, this will be a crisis for 24 million Americans and counting. In my state, premiums are already going up by between 24 and 50%, depending on the healthcare plan, depending on the region of the state. I mean, so we are looking at a massive crisis unless Congress acts and acts soon. And my message is to the leadership of this body, to the leaders of the House, the leaders of the Senate, maybe it's time you all locked yourselves in a room and got to a solution here, because it's not going to be a solution in a couple of weeks to say, well, we just couldn't get it done. We couldn't think of anything, better luck next year. If that's the attitude that ends up being taken in this body, millions of Americans are going to go without health care coverage. And let's be honest, millions of Americans can't afford it now before we hit the cliff. So I think it's time to get serious here about the crisis that we are facing. We have got to take action on the subsidies. As I've said for months now, listen, I'm open to proposals. I'm open to any proposal that will keep the costs down, but we've got to take action. Doing nothing is not a solution. But I have another suggestion to make, and it's a bill that a proposal I'd like to introduce. I am introducing today. In addition to taking action on subsidies, why shouldn't we make healthcare tax-free in this country? Why shouldn't we just exempt all health care from taxes? We did no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime earlier this year. How about no taxes on health care? If you pay premiums, you ought to be able to deduct that from your taxes. If you have out-of-pocket medical expenses, you ought to be able to deduct every dollar off of your taxes. You want to lower the cost of health care immediately? Do that. No taxes on health care for any American. And you set an upper limit so you don't have rich people gaming the system. I get it, that's fine. But let's think about working people in this country who cannot afford health care. What if we said to them today, we're not going to tax your health care costs? Does anybody on the panel have a reaction to that? Let me start with you, Dr. Fagan. We'll just go down the panel. What do you think? No taxes on health care.
You know, I've never, it could work. You know, people are paying a lot for their health care. I think working people look for any advantage that they could get, but I'd have to look at it more in detail.
Ms. Strauss?
Simple answer is yes. Anytime you can get a savings on a tax deduction, absolutely, and especially something around healthcare.
Mr. White, any reaction?
Taxes increase costs, so eliminating them should lower costs. The people here especially affected are the self-employed, and they have to itemize up to 7.5% of their income in order to get the same tax benefit that a big company can get. So what you're talking about is equalizing, leveling the playing field for everyone.
Yeah,
So
that's exactly right.
That makes sense.
That's exactly right. Instead of 7.5%, and you have to itemize, let's move it above the line. Let's say that you can take that deduction, no matter if you're itemizing or not. Very few people itemize, and let's allow them to take the deduction on the first dollar. I mean, that would lower healthcare costs for millions and millions of Americans. I think it's something that we should seriously consider.
Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, at a Senate Health Committee hearing today about health care reform. The witnesses were Joel White, Counsel for Affordable Health Coverage President, Dr. Claudia Fagan, Physicians for a National Health Program National Coordinator, and Marcy Strauss, Capital Benefits Group Partner and Benefits Consultant. Senator Patty Murray, Democrat of Washington State, also at this hearing, said the simplest fix to the expiring Affordable Care Act insurance premium tax credits is to extend them.
We got to be real here. We are a month into open enrollment, a full month. The time to save people from these huge increases in costs they're going to see because the ACA tax credits expired was before these premium hikes were all but locked in. Saying, let's start talking about fixing this now, a month into open enrollment, instead of at any point earlier this year when we actually had time to stop premiums from skyrocketing or look at some of these different reforms. You know, this is about as serious as expressing concern about RFK Jr.'s anti-vax crusade after voting to make him the most powerful public health official in the country. The time is out. Realistically, the only way now we can stop people from seeing these huge increases is a clean extension and a longer open enrollment. And I think we should be honest about that. I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, the ideas being tossed around, even if I have some concerns with some of the proposals. But if Republicans had come to the table at any point earlier this year, there would be time to sit down and talk about this.
Senator Patty Murray, Democrat from Washington State, at a Health Committee hearing today. Breitbart News writing that House Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio, Ways and Means Committee Chair Jason Smith, Republican of Missouri, and Energy and Commerce Committee Chair Brett Guthrie, Republican of Kentucky, said a GAO report has revealed the staggering level of fraud that occurs thanks to Obamacare subsidies. The report conducted covert operations, which included fictitious identities that flood insurers with unjustified subsidies. It found that 100% of the fake applicants were approved by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, as recently as 2024, and 90% of the fraudulent applicants continue to receive coverage in 2025, reporting from Breitbart News. The U.S. House, a new Democrat coalition, which says it has 116 members, more than half the total Democrats in the House, unveiled a health care reform plan today at a news conference in Washington, D.C. One of the members is Congresswoman Terry Sewell, Democrat from Alabama.
Our plan is guided by three core principles. First, we believe that every American should have access to quality, affordable health care with predictable costs, because no one should have to choose between paying for a prescription and putting food on the table. Second, we believe in strengthening Medicare, Medicaid, and the ACA, because these programs are not partisan luxuries, they are lifelines for so many Americans. Third, we believe that every American, regardless of their zip code, should have the access to doctors, hospitals, and medicines close to their homes. To achieve that, our plan takes a series of common sense steps. It would lower costs by locking in the ACA's enhanced premium tax credits and extending out-of-pocket drug caps to Americans with private insurance. It would reverse the devastating cuts to Medicare and Medicaid while cracking down on fraud and abuse. It would close the coverage gap that continues to plague states like Alabama by restoring the Trump administration's $90 million cut to the ACA Navigator program and streamline enrollment. It would also protect women's health care, encourage research and innovation, and strengthen our public health infrastructure. At its core, this action plan is about restoring integrity and security. It is about ensuring that seniors can retire with a peace of mind, that parents can take their children to the doctor without fear of bankruptcy, and that every American, regardless of income or zip code, has access to quality, affordable health care. Health care is not a privilege in this great country of privilege. It is a right, I believe. We are committed to defending that right against those who would undermine it. So today we call on our colleagues across the aisle to join us. Let us put politics aside and put the needs of the American people first. Let's build a healthcare system that reflects the values of fairness, compassion, and responsibility. The new Democratic coalition is proud to lead this fight. Together, we must ensure that our healthcare system works for everyone, not just the wealthy and well-connected, but for every family in every community, and we are resolved to making that happen.
Congresswoman Terry Sewell, Democrat from Alabama, at a news conference with other members of the new Democrat coalition introducing their health care reform plan. Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, and Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, the minority leaders in each chamber, held a news conference today saying that the two are united on the way forward. Jeffries has been pushing a Democratic-led discharge petition to extend the Affordable Care Act premium subsidies for 3 years, saying that they need just 4 Republicans to sign on to get to the House floor for a vote. A reporter asked Senator Schumer if a 3-year extension will be what the Democrats put up for a vote in the Senate next week, and he answered, "Stay tuned." This is Washington Today. Reuters writing that billionaire private astronaut Jared Isaacman, President Donald Trump's nominee to lead NASA, on Wednesday touted his plans to put U.S. astronauts back on the moon before China gets there, and sought to portray himself as independent from SpaceX CEO Elon Musk as he faced his second Senate confirmation hearing. Isaacman, an e-commerce mogul who twice flew to orbit on all private astronaut missions as a customer and collaborator with SpaceX, told senators that falling behind in the moon race with China could shift the balance of power here on Earth. That was from Reuters. Here is Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, chair of the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, questioning the nominee.
It's also part of U.S. law that it is American policy to have sustained human habitation either on the moon or in cislunar orbit. Do you agree with that objective, and do you commit to doing everything humanly possible to achieving it?
I do, Senator. I think the President of the United States would be very excited to see a lunar base.
And I will say, just a minute ago, you talked about competing providers. I want to be very clear. I have no particular interest in one provider versus another. My interest is in making sure the objective is achieved. And at times, some have suggested that the objective of going to the moon and the objective of going to Mars are in tension. I don't believe they're in tension. I believe both are critical. America will be the first to land on Mars. That is critically important. That is written into law, and I was proud to author that provision in law. But I also think at the same time we cannot lose the moon and lose the race to the moon to China. Do you agree that both are critical priorities?
I do, Senator. And again, consistent with my prior testimony before this committee, there actually are parallel efforts underway. Now there is no question the overwhelming near-term priority is to return American astronauts to the moon and, again, establish an enduring presence on what is a very scarce piece of real estate that we're interested in at this time. But as I mentioned before, in order for those American astronauts to step foot off a lander onto the lunar surface, it means one or both, and actually potentially many more commercial providers will have pioneered reusable heavy lift launch capabilities and on-orbit prop transfer, which is the same capability, really the next giant leap capability that America needs for missions to the moon, Mars, and beyond.
Jared Isaacman, NASA Administrator nominee, questioned by Senator Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, chair of the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. More from the Reuters article. President Trump first nominated Isaacman to head the U.S. Space Agency in December 2024, but withdrew the nomination in May after a falling out between the Republican president and Elon Musk. Sean Duffy, the head of the U.S. Department of Transportation, was named interim NASA administrator in July. Musk advocated for Isaacman's nomination when Trump was elected in 2024. Musk had sought to realign the U.S. space program with a greater focus on Mars during his stint as a close advisor to Trump. That was from Reuters. Senator Gary Peters, Democrat of Michigan, asked Isaacman today about the renomination.
Mr. Isaacman, welcome back to the committee. You were here before for this position, and as we all know, President Trump withdrew your nomination earlier, citing concerns with your, I believe, political donations to Democratic candidates. And in a July 6th post on Truth Social, the president also stated that it would be absolutely inappropriate for you to head NASA, given your close relationship with SpaceX CEO Elon Musk. Since that time, there have been additional reports that in the time between your nomination being pulled and now being renominated by the president, I think you've donated roughly $2 million to President Trump's super PAC. So based off this information, I'm concerned that the decision-making around this position may not have been about ensuring NASA has strong leadership to carry out its mandate. So could you please explain what happened to make President Trump reconsider the decision to pull your nomination, and what assurances you may have provided, if any, that your relationship with Elon Musk and SpaceX would not create a significant conflict of interest for you in this role?
Well, Senator, there's a lot there, so I will try and hit it all. If I miss anything, please ask me to correct. So first and foremost, I wouldn't even begin to want to speculate, why the president nominated me, withdrew it, and renominated me, other than to say I was grateful for the opportunity in the first place. It was an incredible experience. When the president pulled my nomination, he gifted me an extended summer vacation where I could take my kids on some adventures before they lose interest in me. And then I understand that he ran a competitive process and interviewed several candidates. I was grateful for consideration at the time and happy to be here now. In terms of donations, I think it was covered over the summer. I actually felt I had enough exposure to Washington and got over maybe some of the initial intimidation factors, so much so that I thought perhaps I would have a political career, maybe be able to contribute for all the right reasons. So it shouldn't be surprising that I supported the Republican Party. At the same time period, I probably made 30 times that amount in donations to charitable causes. And with respect to Elon Musk, that question comes up. In fact, every story I see that writes about my nomination refers to the Musk ally or the Musk friend. It's funny that in a world where everybody has a phone with a camera on it, there are no pictures of us at dinner, at a bar, on an airplane, or on a yacht, because they don't exist. My relationship with Mr. Musk is the fact that I led 2 missions to space at SpaceX, because it's the only organization that can send astronauts to and from space since the shuttle was retired. And in that respect, my relationship is no different than that of NASA.
Jared Isaacman nominated for NASA Administrator, questioned by Senator Gary Peters, Democrat of Michigan, at today's Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee confirmation hearing. One more paragraph from the Reuters article on this hearing. If confirmed to the post, Isaacman, 42 years old, would oversee some 14,000 employees and a roughly $25 billion budget that the Trump administration has proposed cutting by 25% for 2026. Nearly 4,000 NASA employees took buyouts the Trump administration offered in January and April, a roughly 20% reduction of the agency's previous 18,000 headcount. That was from Reuters. Story from The Independent. NATO and the United Kingdom have hit back at Vladimir Putin's threat that Russia is ready for war with Europe. British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer's spokesperson said Putin's comments were Kremlin claptrap, while NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte insisted the alliance was willing to do what it takes to protect our 1 billion people and secure our territory. The ramping up of rhetoric comes as hopes for a U.S.-brokered peace deal in Ukraine fade. On Wednesday, a planned meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and a U.S. delegation was canceled, hours after President Donald Trump's team appeared to leave Moscow empty-handed. Nevertheless, Mr. Rutte insisted Mr. Trump is the only person in the whole world able to break the deadlock over the Ukraine war. Some of the reporting from The Independent. Here is NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at a news conference in Brussels after a meeting of the NATO Defense Council.
Secretary General Mattia Bagnoli answered the National Italian News Agency. The Kremlin essentially said no to the latest U.S. proposal, or at least this is what we read in the press. But I mean, we've been there before. It seems like Groundhog Day. Do you agree that with those that who think that this is basically some sort of a psyop operation from the Kremlin to derail the U.S. sanctions and the EU plan on the frozen assets, so kicking the can down the road? And secondly, the Finnish President Alexander Stubb said in an interview that the conditions for a just peace in Ukraine are unlikely to be met. And do you share that assessment?
Well, again, as I said a number of times, there is only one person in the whole world who was able to break the deadlock when it comes to the war in Ukraine, and that is the American President Donald J. Trump, and he did. He started in February to get engaged, and he is engaged up to and including today. And his team is engaged, including Steve Witkoff, Marco Rubio, and all the key players on the American side. And that's crucial, because in the end, US is by far the biggest ally in NATO and the strongest nation on earth. And it's really up to them first to break that deadlock and then make sure that others follow. But getting this peace done, as also the American president has said, is not something in a straight line in one go. You need proposals on the table, you need to have discussions, and we have seen the meetings in Geneva, in Miami, now yesterday in Moscow. It will be a step-by-step approach. The last thing I want to do is to basically make it more difficult to get to a deal by commenting on every in-between step. I can assure you that NATO here, the headquarters, myself, my team, is closely coordinating with the White House, with State Department, with all the relevant players on the American side to be of maximum help in this process, because we find it crucial. And we all agree that in the end what you need is a sovereign Ukraine which knows that we have in place the necessary so-called security guarantees by which Russia will, after a hopeful peace deal or a long-term ceasefire, will never again try to attack Ukraine, because then they know the reaction will be devastating. That's what we are aiming for.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at a news conference today in Brussels. In London, during Prime Minister's questions, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, head of the Labour Party, got this question from Conservative MP Bernard Jenkin.
Mr. Speaker, could the Prime Minister give his assessment of the latest news that President Putin has again turned down terms for peace in Ukraine, and in the light of his extraordinary outburst designed to destabilise our understanding of the truth? He did say Russia is ready for war with NATO. How ready are we?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank him for raising this? And I updated the House last week on the attempts to get a lasting peace. We all know that Putin is the aggressor here. We all know that Putin is dragging his feet not wanting to come to the table, not wanting to reach an agreement. We have to continue to put pressure on in every conceivable way. That is in supporting Ukraine with capability and resource, but also ensuring that our sanctions, acting with allies, do as much damage to the economy in Russia as we can, and pressure that we can put on. We'll continue to do so, but he's absolutely right to raise it, and I thank him for doing so.
The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer during Prime Minister's Question Time in the House of Commons in London today. Back in Washington, D.C., a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee held a hearing titled The Abduction of Ukrainian Children by the Russian Federation. There are some estimates that there are 20,000 Ukrainian children that have been taken by Russian authorities in the nearly 4 years of war. Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat of Minnesota, testified as a witness before the hearing.
It's one thing to have the numbers that we all use about the number of kids that are over there, some of them as old as teenagers, some of them as young as 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old. It's another to actually sit across the table from them and their families. I met Sashko, who was taken from his home in Mariupol after being wounded in a Russian bombardment. At our breakfast, he was there with his brave grandma, Ludmila, who told me she eventually took matters into her own hands, this grandma, when he was able to get a cell phone and call her, and she went into the occupied territory to rescue him. With the Pope, I stood next to Veronica, who was confined in Russia against her will for both her 13th and her 14th birthdays, including periods of time in isolation before she managed to escape. These are tragic stories of childhoods forever changed by brutality, but they are also stories of resilience and hope, the stories of the Ukrainian people who, against all odds, have continued to stand up to the brutality of Vladimir Putin. Veronica is attending school again in Kyiv, now in the 11th grade, and to see her big smile when she met the Pope and the tears coming out of her eyes as he gave her a rosary is something I will never forget. More than 1,800 children have been returned, some with the help of the Vatican, and we were there to urge the Pope to use his standing and strong moral authority in the world to help return more children through mediation. I believe the Pope plays a critical role, but in the end, children should never be pawns in a war. And that is why Senator Britt and I joined you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Blumenthal on this important bill.
Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat of Minnesota, at a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee hearing. She was one of the witnesses. And in the White House Oval Office, President Trump was asked about the recent talks to try to end the war in Ukraine.
Mr. President, if you do find...
When you spoke with Mr. Witkoff and with Mr. Kushner... Last night, did they give you the sense that President Putin still wants to end the war, wants to make peace?
He would like to end the war. That's what that was their impression. Now, whether or not, that was their impression. Their impression was that he would like to see the war ended. I think he'd like to get back to dealing a more normal life. I think he'd like to be trading with the United States of America, frankly, instead of, losing thousands of soldiers a week. But their impression was very strongly that he'd like to make a deal.
President Donald Trump answering reporters' questions in the White House Oval Office. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter Word for Word. We'll send you the stories making headlines in Washington. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.